Alright, to factor this polynomial, they've asked us to do this by grouping. Even if they hadn't given us a description of how to factor it, if our job was to factor it, I usually follow a little roadmap, and I look for a GCF, and then I pay attention to how many terms are there. In this case, you have 4 terms, so you can either use factor by grouping or the box method. Since they've asked us to use factor by grouping, I'll do that first, and then I'll use the box method. Either way, you will get the correct answer. Factor by grouping tends to be probably a little more respected than the box method. The box method's rather mechanical, so I guess they feel you have a better vision of what's happening if you're using factor by grouping. Okay. Factor by grouping, you group together the first 2 terms and then the second 2 terms, and you factor out the GCF. So paying attention to our first 2 terms, I can get an x squared out of each one. So when you factor something out, the common practice is to put it in front of the parentheses. I'm going to factor out an x squared, and then the thing in parentheses will be what's left after I factor out x squared. So if I factor out x squared from there, I'm left with 5x squared. If I factor x squared out from there, I'm left with -3. Then I turn my attention to the next 2 terms. I can get a 3 out of each term, and basically I'll be getting a +3 out of each term, and that's largely because when I do, I'm going to end up with a -3, and that's what I want to see over here. I want to see in parentheses the same thing that I have here, which is 5x squared minus 3. Alright, so if I factor 3 out of 15x squared, I'm left with 5x squared. If I factor 3 out of -9, I'm left with -3. And now you basically repeat the process of factoring out. You have in parentheses 5x squared -3, 5x squared -3. That is now our common term. We're going to factor out the common term, and the standard practice is you put that in front of the parentheses. 5x squared minus 3 is what we're factoring out, and we're going to put that in front of this set of parentheses. If I factor 5x squared minus 3 from here, I'll be left with x squared. If I factor 5x squared minus 3 from here, I'll be left with just that +3. This is the factored form of this polynomial. Alright, I'll do this again just using the box method. Maybe I can just slide it over. I'll get the same answer. Alright, so I'll give myself a 4-chamber box. First term goes in the first box. Last term goes in the last box. I don't really care about the negative down here. And then the other 2 terms, it doesn't matter which boxes they go in. So here's my -3x squared. I do care about the negative here, because if I have a negative almost out, I pull it out. And then I have a 15x squared. Okay, now you simply factor out the GCF. Well, you don't really factor it out. You look for the greatest common factor, going straight up, straight across, and straight across. Okay? So from here you can get a 3. Going straight up here, the GCF would be x squared. Coming straight across here, the GCF, don't mean to have that a negative, will be 5x squared. And coming straight across here, the GCF is 3. And again, if there's a negative almost out, I pull it out. Alright, so your 2 binomials, x squared plus 3, and 5x squared -3. So this is the factored form of our original polynomial. Now you notice they are in a slightly different order. If you use factor by grouping, the standard practice is to put what you factor out in front of the parentheses, so they really do want to see this out here. If you're using the box method, it doesn't really matter what order they're in. Either way, you'll get the same answer, so it's not a real big deal. But standard practice is when you factor something out, it goes in front of the parentheses.